I'm thrilled to welcome everyone to today's press call. I know I don't need to tell anyone who is joining today that this is a historic week. Yesterday, a jury of everyday Americans found Donald Trump guilty on 34 of 34 counts. This is a victory for the integrity of our elections and an inflection point for the rule of law. We can truly take pride in members of a jury who gave up weeks of their lives to parse through mountains of evidence and work to reach a verdict, knowing the scrutiny they will face. But this verdict is only one part of the test for our country. The assaults on every aspect of the process, a theme through the trial, picked up with renewed vigor after the verdict was read. So now it is time to move forward and celebrate the rule of law. Trump made deception a cornerstone of his campaign for the White House twice. And now he will go down in history as the president who has had 2 impeachments and 34 felony convictions to his name, with more trials to come. Donald Trump should be held accountable for his actions, just like any other citizen who breaks the law. And last night, we saw that reality in New York City. Gathered today are representatives of our coalition and incredible leaders to share their perspectives on the verdict, what will happen next, and what this all means for democracy. So let's jump in. I'm thrilled that we are welcoming to start our event Representative Jerry Nadler. Representative Nadler represents New York 12 and is the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee. He's also a longtime champion of the rule of law and led the 2 impeachments of former President Trump in the House. Rep. Nadler, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Yesterday was indeed a demonstration that no one is above the law and that the law is still operating properly in the United States, at least in New York City. Of course, we saw the former president and all his minions, the Speaker of the House and various other people saying it's all a plot by President Biden. It's a weaponized justice system. We saw that Chairman Jordan, who's unfortunately chairman of the Judiciary Committee, is demanded the presence next week of DA Bragg and one of his assistants to testify about this persecutorial prosecution of the president. He will, of course, reject that. But this is a ringing affirmation of the rule of law. The former president has committed so many crimes. He has managed on every other one of his trials of his indictments, I should say, through a strategy of delay, and with the concurrence of the Supreme Court, and with the concurrence of a very pliant judge in Aileen Cannon in Florida, to postpone all these trials to after the election. So it is likely the only trial that will conclude before the election is this one, and it is very important for the American people to know before an election that they're dealing with a convicted felon. So I think this is the importance of what happened yesterday cannot be overestimated. It also shows that our system of justice works. That 12 jurors in a very picked at random in a very emotional and important prosecution can work well, can go through the evidence and go through the evidence quickly. It's also a testament to DA Bragg and his team that they presented an overwhelming case. The defense, of course, said that you can't depend on the word of Michael Cohen, a demonstrated liar, and of course the prosecution had mountains of corroborating evidence for what Trump said, for what Cohen said, which they introduced before Cohen's testimony, and the jury, which asked to have a key part of that Pecker's testimony from very early on read back to it, was very conscientious and did his job, and we can still depend on the American system of justice, despite the attempts by former President Trump and basically the entire Republican Party at this point to destroy our faith in the American system of justice. We can still believe in it. And it's still true that no one is above the law, and we still have to continue to fight for it.
Thanks for that. Could not agree more. With those sentiments, we're going to turn to our next speaker, Norm Eisen, legal expert and pundit, former impeachment counsel, and former White House ethics czar. Norm.
Thank you, Lisa. I was privileged to be in the court every day to see the prosecution of this tremendously important and historic case, and to hear the verdict from 34 felony counts from that Manhattan jury that my friend and client in the impeachment, Chairman Nadler, so rightly is proud of, as American justice is demonstrated in Manhattan. I want to emphasize that this was a democracy case. In order to find Donald Trump guilty on those 34 counts of document falsification as felonies, there had to be an additional crime that was covered up. And the only crime that was presented to the jury, and it was backed up by that tsunami of evidence that prosecutors put in across the trial, was conspiracy to interfere with, unlawfully influence the 2016 election by paying hush money, to deprive voters of information, to deceive the voters in order to grasp power. If that sounds familiar, that 2016 election interference that this jury adjudicated and found to have taken place, it's because that identical pattern in even larger form is what occurred in 2020. We should have been already talking about a verdict in the 2020 election interference case here in DC, which had been set for March. The Supreme Court has unconscionably, Trump's allies in the pro-Trump wing of the court, with all their conflicts and corruption, have unconscionably delayed that case, which based on the absurd idea, which was tried in New York, by the way. They gave it the back of the hand, presidential immunity. It's even more extreme in the DC case, to commit assassinations with impunity. That can't be right. So it is a compare and contrast. But for today, we can take gratification. A very fair judge, a hardworking jury, the best. I've never seen a better judge and jury in all my years, reaching this conclusion. Donald Trump interfered with the election, conspired, and then covered it up. He's adjudicated guilty, and indeed, he is guilty of those serious democracy and cover-up crimes.
Thanks, Norm. We'll now turn to Noah Bookbinder, President and Chief Executive Officer of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, or CREW. Noah, to you.
Thanks, Lisa, and it's an honor to be here with Congressman Nadler and Norm Eisen and really great leaders on the effort to uphold the rule of law in the United States and on what's really a solemn occasion for this country. What we saw over the past weeks and months in New York, and particularly in this guilty verdict yesterday, is a demonstration of the fairness and resilience of our system of justice. Even though we're hearing a lot of contrary assertions from other quarters, but that's really what we saw. With DA Bragg, who did an extraordinary job in this prosecution, far from having someone who brought a vendetta or an agenda, this is a prosecutor who got to this case reluctantly, actually took a lot of criticism when he first became the district attorney for backing off of the Trump prosecution, and came around to it only when the strength and importance of the case became very apparent. This is a case which had extensive process and really able representation of Donald Trump. The case was delayed so that Trump's team would have more time to review all of the evidence. Donald Trump's attorneys brought a lot of motions. They won some of those motions. They engaged in a really thorough and sometimes withering cross-examination of witnesses, including Michael Cohen. They gave a very aggressive closing statement. This is a case where the verdict is stronger because the defense was so strong. It's a case where the legal work on all sides was really strong. That's how our system works. That's how you get to the truth. It's a case where the jury, which was a group of 12 regular Americans who were rigorously vetted by the judge and by attorneys for both sides to determine that they didn't come in with preconceived notions, with bias, then engaged in a fair and thorough examination of the evidence. And it's a jury, a New York jury, that ought to be trusted, just as folks would trust a jury in Texas or in Florida or anywhere else in this country. Secondly, I just wanted to make the point that Donald Trump, over a matter of years, appears to have engaged, there's a lot of evidence that he engaged in a pattern of illegal conduct to advance his own power. So that starts with the conduct at issue in this case, which was designed to help him in the 2016 election, and goes all the way to his scheme to keep himself in power after losing the 2020 election, culminating in inciting a violent insurrection. This is all very much related. And what we finally have here in this New York verdict is some very appropriate accountability for that overall scheme and pattern. And finally, the final point I wanted to make is that in this country, justice and accountability sometimes move slowly, but it does move. And so going all the way back to 2018, my organization Crew, working with Norm Eisen, who we all just heard from, was our chair at the time, filed a series of complaints against Donald Trump for failing to disclose the liability, the debt that he owed to Michael Cohen on his personal financial disclosures. And in response to those complaints, he did actually disclose that liability and his reimbursement of it. And that disclosure ended up being an important piece of evidence in this New York trial. So you had work done 5, 6, 7 years ago, which ultimately played a role in helping to ensure accountability for the first of many attacks on our democracy. And I'm confident that work to ensure accountability is going to continue, and that it will continue to bear fruit, and that we're going to continue to see real accountability going forward.
Thanks, Noah. So now we'll turn to Ruth Ben-Ghiat, professor of history at NYU and an expert in authoritarianism, propaganda, and democracy protection. Over to you.
Thanks, everybody, for coming to hear all of us. I'm speaking as an expert in autocracy. So we've been living through a massive and concerted attempt to delegitimize and discredit all of our democratic institutions, but especially elections and the judiciary. They are a major target. And so it's a reminder that the fact this trial took place at all and was able to unfold in the professional way it did is a testament to the worth and functioning of our democracy, just as the fact that the press could report it and that we could be here to discuss it today. Because in all the states with leaders that Trump has been admiring for years publicly, he's been trying to condition Americans to want this kind of strongman leadership. As you know, you can't even criticize the leader, much less try and hold him accountable for any crimes. So in China, in Russia, in Turkey, in Hungary, and Orban just posted today a message egging Trump on, encouraging Trump, which is a sitting autocrat furthering this kind of discrediting of a democracy. And this trial could never have happened. And this might be obvious, but it's our democracy is precious and it's at great risk. Now, we're also not the only democracy to have held a former head of state accountable. There have been many democracies that have convicted and jailed, sometimes jailed former heads of state. A partial list is Israel and Peru and France, Italy and Brazil. And right now, just a few days ago, Bolsonaro, who had his own insurrection, but was convicted of spreading election fraud, He's been banned from running for office until 2030, and his appeal was just denied. And so that's another way you deal with people who are dangerous to the system. You ban them from politics, and that happened to Berlusconi in Italy too. So authoritarianism is about converting the rule of law into rule by the lawless. So it's converting the rule of law into rule by the lawless. And it's about taking away the rights of the many, including voting rights, the right to prosecute criminals sometimes, and the state decides who the criminals are, and giving the few unlimited liberties to commit crimes without any consequence. And it's about making the leader feel safe. That's what strongmen want, by making them impossible to prosecute, giving them immunity. And you're hearing Trump talk about that as well. So all of this is a testament, as others have said, to our democracy and how precious it is. I'm very grateful to be living in a place where we can be having this discussion.
Good sentiment. Thanks, Ruth. All right, we'll now head to Christian Nunez, president of the National Organization for Women, or NOW.
Thank you very much for having me today. I'm very happy to be here with everyone and with the Not Above the Law Coalition. I think the most important thing I want to start off by saying is that the conviction of former President Donald Trump on the 34 counts really speaks to the importance of our citizens and how we really truly believe in democracy. Seeing Donald Trump being convicted of the 34 counts in New York, I think it's really also important to show that the rule of law still remains under attack. You know, seeing his first response of the verdict was to continue showing his political attack, his grievance, and his dangerous lies of election interference continued as soon as the verdict was read. And he continues to show his lack of accountability and why he is dangerous for our country and democracy. This verdict is just a first step of accountability, and we must continue to demand accountability from the justice system to hold Trump accountable for the criminal felonies that he's committed with appropriate and just sentencing without further delay, just as any other citizen would be held accountable. We have often seen many citizens marginalized, particularly from marginalized groups, be held for harsher crimes, harsher penalties for little and smaller crimes and smaller felonies, even misdemeanors. So I think it's really important that we cannot allow allegiance, privilege, or favoritism to create any additional barriers in our justice systems and his sentencing. We must demand that the Supreme Court deny immunity and clear the way for his next federal trial in DC before the election, and to show that justice will prevail and our country's dignity and democracy can be preserved, and we can restore trust and hope with our citizens. So this is an important first step, and I really believe that we will continue on holding him accountable and making sure that we say that no one is above the law.
Thanks so much, Christian. We'll now turn to Tristan Snell, who is with Main Street Law and the author of Taking Down Trump, 12 Rules for Prosecuting Donald Trump by Someone Who Did It Successfully. Tristan, to you.
Hi, can everybody see and hear me okay?
We can hear you. I don't see any picture for you, but
Here, I think it's been disabled.
Oh.
It says I cannot enable it.
Got it. Okay, we will work on that on our side, but go forth and hopefully we can fix it.
Okay, so thank you so much for having me here today. Really, really appreciate it. I think one of the things that I am struck by with this verdict and with the overall case is the degree to which this was a victory of popular opinion and popular action being able to be brought forth to demand justice and to demand accountability. This was a case that I don't know if it would have been brought had it not been for all of us raising our voices and demanding that this case be brought. This was a case that was not brought very publicly 2 years ago. In February of 2022, the Manhattan DA's office had made it clear that the case was shelved, and it was a very public dispute that suddenly arose. And we saw a lot of public opinion be extremely vocal in saying that, oh, there we go. Hi, everybody. We saw public opinion be very vocal in saying that this was not the right decision and saying that we needed to see this case be brought forward and that it should not be halted. That really extended to the media, but that narrative came from us. It came from activists. It came from folks raising their voices on social media. That ended up, it was really a textbook example, in my opinion, of where that public opinion, that activism, and that online activism helped change the narrative. That plus there were op-eds, there were commentators on TV and on the radio and on podcasts. There was an enormous amount of outcry saying that the Manhattan DA's office should actually activate that investigation, bring that prosecution, carry it forward to its conclusion rather than bringing it to an artificial and premature end. That outcry, I believe, changed the game, much as I believe it did with regard to January 6th, where it is unclear whether or not DOJ was going to bring any cases against the leadership of the January 6th insurrection, as opposed to simply bringing it against the foot soldiers who attacked the Capitol that day. It was the public opinion and the political power represented and embodied by the January 6th Commission in the House and the leadership that we saw there from folks like Congressman Nadler, Speaker Pelosi at the time, that made sure that that actually happened. And we saw public hearings and public accountability that built a public coalition that said, we are going to make sure that these cases are actually brought. They are going to see the light of day. We are going to bring cases no matter how high up we go, no matter which powerful people it affects. I think that that's what happened here in Manhattan. And I think that it really shows that justice truly is a choice we make. It is something we have to fight for daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. The good guys are there to hold the bad guys accountable, but it is our job to hold those good guys accountable. And that's why I think the work that everybody is doing on this is so important, and it needs to continue with regard to this case and with regard to the other cases that are currently pending.
Thanks so much, Tristan. All right, we're going to turn to our final speaker, Fernandes, Vice President of the Constitutional Accountability Center and co-chair, one of the co-chairs of the Not Above the Law Coalition. Praveen, to you. Oh, and you are muted.
Oops, so sorry. Thank you so much, Lisa. Yesterday, 12 everyday Americans discharged one of our nation's most serious civic duties, serving on a jury, carefully examining all the evidence, and rendering a decision based on the law and facts. The jury in Manhattan unanimously found Donald Trump guilty of 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, as you know. But here, the context for the falsified records is critically important. This was about keeping damaging information away from voters for fear of what they might do at the ballot box if they had a complete picture of the candidate. In returning their verdict, the jurors vindicated one of the most important rule of law precepts: no one is above the law. The laws that apply to everyday Americans must also apply to the nation's most powerful. And in rendering this judgment yesterday that Donald Trump is guilty, this jury shared with the American public the conclusion that it reached after fairly and impartially considering all the information they had been given. That information about the lengths to which Donald Trump was willing to go to keep information from American voters in the run-up to the 2016 election is now available to all of us in the nation. And that is an important byproduct of this process as well. That information also paints a troubling picture of anti-democratic behavior by Trump that is of a piece with the allegations and indictments in other pending cases. Just as the information presented in this trial illustrated what Trump was willing to do for fear that Americans would vote against him in 2016, the Fulton County indictment and January 6 related federal indictment contain allegations that illustrate what Trump was willing to do after Americans voted in 2020. Different proceedings and different bodies of law, to be sure, but the same antipathy to meaningful voter choice. And with that, I think we have some time for some questions, and I'll give it back over to you, Lisa. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, Praveen. So flagging for our attendees, to ask questions, please type it into the chat to the panelists, and I will read them out. Just please identify yourself when you do. We'll give everyone a quick second to do that. And appreciate. Okay. I see. Hold on one second. I see part of a question. We'll begin with it. So hearing from Ryan Terranelli, a question for Rep. Nadler. Thoughts on the hearing announced by Chair Jordan today?
Well, this is another in a series of hearings that Chairman Jordan has held to try to discredit the judicial proceedings, any judicial proceedings against President Trump. He has created this weaponization committee and the Judiciary Committee, weaponization being the allegation of weaponization of the federal government, of the prosecutorial function of the federal government against Trump and against conservatives generally. He held hearing right after the indictment was announced by Bragg. The Judiciary Committee held hearings, field hearings in Manhattan about Bragg. We subpoenaed, I shouldn't say we, he subpoenaed Bragg. Bragg, of course, didn't testify. Some others did. But it's a continuing attempt to bully the prosecutors into abandoning prosecutions and to tell the country the false story of persecution of the president and to help undermine confidence in the criminal justice system in the United States generally.
Thanks for that. And a sort of a second piece to his question, which got cut off, was just, how this feels, the use of the House committee label to defend Trump.
Well, it's very unfortunate, obviously. It's a misuse of the power of government, the power of the House, among others, to try to undermine the American system of government and to undermine the confidence that no one is above the law. To say that, in effect, Republicans or Trump is above the law. And this is a very obnoxious thing, obviously.
Thanks for that. This is a question from Jess Biggood with the New York Times, directed at Rep. Nadler, but interested in what others think as well. Do you see this verdict as a moment to celebrate?
Yes, I do. I think it is a moment to celebrate that despite all the pressures, this is still a country of laws. This is still a state of laws, and no one is above the law. And this reinforces that. Of course, it'll be subject to many challenges, but it's unfortunate that we haven't gotten to the other trials. But it is a major step in affirming the rule of law and that no one is above the law.
Thank you for that. Love to hear others' perspectives. Go ahead, Ruth.
Yeah, I think it's also really important as a message to Trump voters and other kinds of voters, because this is not a neutral candidate. This is somebody who not only incited a violent insurrection in the past, but says that he would like to be a dictator, even just for one day in the future, and has plans to, as you know, to deport tens of millions of people and act like an autocrat, is allied with autocrats. So all the more important to show that this person, to show his followers that this person is not indeed the man above all other men, the whole strong man, omnipotent, cannot be touched, and will be in office forever. And Trump's talking about removing term limits. So I think it sends a very, very strong message, given the strength of his personality cult as well.
Thank you.
Oh,
go ahead, Norm, and then Noah.
Yes, it's a very complicated moment. I'm sitting there as those 34 guilty verdicts were read by the foreman. 12 Americans, Trump's peers, and the American democracy that has this structure. We can be proud that the rule of law held, and the core American principle that no one is above the law was affirmed. But it's sad and indeed tragic that that jury found of necessity that Donald Trump intended to interfere in the 2016 election. He may have succeeded. We will never know if suppressing this information changed the outcome of that election, and with it, American history. So it's a mixture of pride and sadness at the verdict that the jury delivered.
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, no, just to agree with a couple of people who've spoken before, and I certainly agree with Congressman Nadler that we have to celebrate when our system of laws holds even after really vigorous attacks, both in the sort of the wrongdoing here, but also during the process, and that's remarkable, and that's something that we should all feel good about as Americans, but also agreeing with Norm that it's you never want to be in a situation where a former president is on trial. That is a really sad place for a democracy to be. It means that there's something wrong. Even though the trial going forward means that a lot is still right, it means we've gotten into a place that we never would have wanted to be in. So I don't think any of us are, dancing in the streets. This is not a happy day, but it is a day to feel some, as Norm said, some pride in our system.
Noah. Go ahead, Christian.
Speaking on behalf of women and position of women, where Trump stands, I would say that, for women, I would speak, and for those who stand for women's rights, I would say that this is actually a day that I think many women are very, satisfied with this decision, because, from the very beginning, Trump has had a constant attack on women's rights. Has demonstrated a serial predatory behavior toward women. Part of this trial is about regarding his behavior toward women. And I think that this is an important decision to show that he also can be held accountable for his behavior toward women that has been very damaging and hostile and aggressive. And so in this way, I think this trial speaks to a lot of things, and it's really important to point that out. A part of the reason why we're experiencing what we're experiencing right now, with the rollback on our rights, reproductive rights, and the rollback on so many things that women are encountering, it's because of the former president, Donald Trump. So I think it's also important to talk about how this all intersects and connects. And so in this way, I agree that it is sad to see that we even would have to get to a place where we are even talking about a former president, even having to go on trial for such egregious behaviors. But at the same time, the point that he's being held accountable for what he has put this country through is extremely important, and restores some hope in, I think, our citizens, that they can finally say that he is not above the law.
Thanks for that. Just one last question, which can be for anyone. So a theme that's come out of this case is obviously that 2016 and what happened here was election interference, very different from how it was initially understood solely as a hush money case. Do you all think that people see a through line, understand the connection between what happened in 2016 that was discussed and convicted here and what happened in 2020?
Well, I don't know if people see a through line. I think it's our job to show them a through line. And as was said, the election interference in 2016 may very well have caused the victory. We don't know. and it may very well have changed American history. Certainly, we know of the attempts to change the 2020 election. Luckily, they were not successful, although that led to the insurrection and to the other things for which Trump is on trial. But I think it's incumbent on all of us to try to do our best to make sure that the American people understand what's going on and the threat to American democracy posed by Donald Trump and by those behind him, especially with the election coming up.
For that, Praveen, I saw you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think tagging on to what Rep. Nadler said, I mentioned this in my remarks. It'll be everyone's responsibility to try to ensure that the conversation illuminates these through lines. And obviously, there are allegations in the other indictments. Obviously, that has not been a trial yet, but we saw how the jury took seriously its necessity and duty to engage with the information and the facts that are there. And the facts that are now resulted in a conviction showed that it's possible that this antipathy to sort of meaningful voter choice we might have gotten a movie trailer in 2016 for what was to come. And as those trials proceed, if they're able to proceed in a timely fashion, we might have that rigorous inquiry through the adversarial process of the other things that are in the indictment. And, obviously I look forward to that.
Norm?
No, I was just coming on camera to see everyone.
Okay,
I
great.
will say, apropos of nothing at all, that Chairman Nadler and myself were two of the first to investigate these crimes as high crimes and misdemeanors. And we interviewed Michael Cohen extensively. He told the truth. His story has not changed one bit since we first did that, and so it puts a smile on my face to see him sitting there, since we were early to see this wrongdoing. It ultimately did not result in articles of impeachment, although we drafted them on this point. And so there's a sense of satisfaction in seeing the former president finally brought to justice. You shouldn't have asked me, Lisa. You shouldn't have asked.
You came on camera. All right. Well, I think with that, we will wrap up our event. Just want to sort of end where I began. There could be no more powerful statement for accountability than what we saw yesterday. This is truly a victory for election integrity and democracy, and a testament to the rule of law that justice can work. And so we appreciate everyone joining us today, all of our great speakers. If you have questions beyond what you asked today, information is in the chat to reach out to Ryan, and we can direct them to any of the panelists. But thank you all so much. Appreciate it. And we'll be back. Thanks.